We welcome you all to Talk the Talk. My name is Janine Steen,
And I'm Tony Ann Antoniato.
the Masters of Myofunctional Therapy.
Together, we interview physicians, dentists, and other professionals to learn how their expertise can benefit you, your child, or your patient's speech and language skills and complement the services they are receiving.
We welcome Beth Lambert to this episode of Talk the Talk. Beth founded Documenting Hope in 2009 and currently serves as the executive director. Documenting Hope is a nonprofit organization that specializes in providing solutions for the root cause of children's health and developmental conditions, while also supporting parents and practitioners who are eager to advance in their approach to treating patients. We are very excited to have Beth with us today, and thank you so much for being here, Beth.
So good to be with you, Tony Ann.
Yes, thank you so much. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about your background and what originally led you into healthcare, and then maybe we'll go into some of that more, pivot moment that you experienced as well.
Yeah, so I actually got into healthcare just thinking that, it was something I wanted to be involved in sort of from a service perspective or, a way to help people. And I started out, my first job out of college was actually in consulting and pharmaceutical consulting, believe it or not. And I worked for medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, hospital system, things like that. And it was interesting because I really got a quick and very informative look at what the healthcare industry is really all about from a business perspective. Like I came in kind of like doe-eyed, like, oh, I want to help people in the healthcare industry, but turned out it was very, very much driven by profit and business. And that's, that is what it is. And I got sort of disillusioned that way about sort of how healthcare runs in this country. Fast forward a little bit, and I had my first two kids actually, and they both had some symptoms that were, nothing that merited a diagnosis, but they were concerning enough that it knocked on a lot of conventional medical doors. Again, having come from sort of a background where I'd spent a lot of time talking to doctors, and in that conventional healthcare system, it was a system I trusted. Mm-hmm. And then through my own kids and trying to understand what might be causing their symptoms, I learned that the system wasn't set up to help kids who had chronic health symptoms or anyone who has chronic health symptoms. It's really set up for acutes and sort of to manage symptoms. So in that process, I actually landed in the office of an integrative physician and naturopath and started looking into more whole child root causes kind of approaches, and learned very quickly that the system that, I thought was normal, the conventional medical system, was actually keeping us sick. And there was a whole other way of viewing healthcare, a whole other way of viewing human health that could prevent and reverse chronic health conditions. So I really got steeped in that whole world and came to meet tons of people who had fully reversed their chronic health conditions, things like autism and life-threatening food allergies and autoimmune diseases. And that blew my mind because when I had worked in the pharmaceutical industry, there was no curing. They were looking at things like, oh, can we do gene therapy to, do CRISPR to affect change? But I was learning that people could change their outcome through diet, lifestyle, personalized therapeutics. And that kind of just opened me up to this, wow, if this is possible, why is this not our standard of care? Why are we not having this be what everybody has access to? So that really set me on a track forward to try and bring that kind of healthcare forward, but also I, in that same period, realized that it wasn't just my kids who had chronic health symptoms, but the vast majority of new moms and dads that I knew, their kids were struggling with something. And so that's when I really woke up to what's happening to our kids. And I published a book called The Compromised Generation that looks at the environmental factors contributing to these conditions. And it documents how people reverse those conditions by addressing those environmental factors.
Wow. Okay. So that's amazing. In those first few days or first few months, probably, I should say, was that overwhelming to kind of be like realizing all this, especially somebody like you who was within the healthcare system? What did that feel like, especially because I would imagine it was personal at the same time because of your children?
Yeah, I think partly it felt like an awakening, like, wow, I had no idea that there was any other way besides going to your conventional pediatrician or your conventional specialist to
Yeah.
treat symptoms. So there was that awakening piece.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also a little piece of feeling betrayed in that I trusted the system. I trusted the experts, and they were giving bad advice and they weren't helping people. And I don't think that's malicious. I don't think I don't think the people in the conventional healthcare system are in any way doing anything other than trying to help people. But the system is set up in a way that is about profit. And it's about trying to make sure that, their bottom lines are met. And so that's something that I think most people are not even aware of. So that was part of my awakening too, is that this isn't healthcare, a business that involves managing people's health. So once I had that kind of paradigm shift in my brain, I was like, this is not the way we should be doing it. It's an entrenched system, and we're all kind of like, stuck in the mindset that we have to go to our conventional pediatrician or our conventional doctors, conventional dentist, what have you. My dad actually was a conventional dentist, and I grew up in a world of conventional doctors. I had two grandfathers who were conventional doctors. So, like I said, these are good people. I think the system has betrayed us in terms of, making us think that these are the only solutions out there, and there are far, far more solutions than we're told about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess with having some family that is on that more traditional side, how would you speak to those more traditional doctors with like trying to tell them more about the approach you have and the approach that is more whole body and holistic? And I think, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that a lot of the times that's the education that they received, the training that they received. So do you do a lot with trying to kind of educate and get to these more traditional types of doctors?
I think we have to, just as you said, understand that this is part of their training. And conventional medicine does some amazing things. Like if I need surgery or if I have to go to an emergency room, I mean, we have some of the best doctors, the most compassionate doctors, some of the most amazing healthcare professionals in the conventional medical system. But the people, it's not, for anything that's they've done wrong. It's the training is set up in a Western medical idea. It's sort of like, it's like it completely ignores 5,000 years of traditional Chinese medicine and 5,000 years of Ayurvedic medicine and sort of ignores the wisdom of nature. It was set up kind of in this post-World War II era. We believed in the miracle drugs, right? We had antibiotics, for instance, that came out in the 1930s and 1940s that were literally miracle cures. We kind of have this medical system that is set up on this idea of like, we're advancing research and new discoveries, and that's going to be what keeps us healthy. But we've really lost touch with the fundamentals, the foundations. And there are a lot of good doctors who will go to their patients and say, you need to exercise, you need to eat right. But even our nutrition education, for instance, where doctors want to tell their patients to eat right, they're not learning the actual real good nutrition information. They're learning something that was taught by the American Dietetics Association, which is owned by big industrial food companies. I mean, the narrative and the messaging is. So what I'm trying to get at is that there are millions of very well-intentioned medical practitioners, healthcare practitioners who went in for the right reasons, are in the profession for the right reasons, but the system and the education has been co-opted by companies, meaning pharmaceutical companies, large food companies, et cetera, to give a message that isn't supporting health. Bandaging your symptoms with a pharmaceutical isn't going to get you better. It's going to help manage your symptoms, and usually there are side effects to those. So I think we need to start looking for ways to shift the narrative. And I think that's a cultural thing. And I think it's happening in a lot of ways, that people are starting to pay attention to their food and their water and their air and what they're putting on their skin and the things that they're doing every day. But it is a cultural shift. And so the medical community will come along as the rest of culture makes that shift, I think.
Yeah. And it's, so challenging because everything is so readily accessible, to us in the United States and elsewhere, obviously, too. But you walk through the food store, and what do you see? All this stuff that really, look at the ingredients, and it makes it hard. And I think that just as a parent myself, taking my kids with me food shopping, and the way they put those things on the shelves that are going to be at their height. And they're like, oh, I want this cereal. And it looks so colorful. And, it's not easy as the professional or as the parent to be aware and to actually stick to these changes.
That's right. I mean, that's why I always say this problem, it's not the medical system's problem. It's not the parents' problem. It's our culture.
Mm-hmm.
We all grew up eating the food that our mama
Yeah.
Right. So like that's cultural. That's very primal to feel comfort in what we grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened is we've had this rapid change to how we live as human beings in that sort of post-World War II industrial era. We live so different from how our grandparents lived in terms of the food, the things we do every day, like on devices and how we're indoors. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things that nobody talks about. We spend our lives indoors.
Yeah.
100 years ago, it was like reversed. We spent most of our time outside, and we had a largely agricultural population in the United States, right? So we are just living differently. And when you grow up in that, when that's your culture, it's plenty different, right? So it's almost this challenge for all of us to have the courage to live counterculture, because the culture that we live in is making us sick.
Right. Yeah, I know. And it's funny because they say so I'm in my young 40s, and they say that I hear people talk about how my age is almost the last generation of people to know life without devices and technology and what it was like. And now, this next generation, it's all they know. And now the parents, it will be all they know. So trying to make those changes. And while social media can have sometimes negative impact, I feel like sometimes it's so positive and powerful, because I feel, especially within our practice, and I'm a speech pathologist and I do myofunctional therapy, that the parents are becoming more and more educated, and the parents are demanding the change for their children and saying, I saw something on social media, I saw something on Facebook about children shouldn't snore. And even though it's common, it's not normal. And, I don't want my child to mouth breathe. I'm seeing all these things about how much mouth breathing can have a negative impact on their sleep and their cognition and their brain development. So I feel like the parents are starting to really get empowered and educated. And like you said, culturally, we need that shift to happen. And I'm hopeful that has started to happen.
I feel like it is. I mean, I started this work about almost 20 years ago. And I feel like I almost feel like I was talking about this stuff into the void. I published a book in 2010, and I was I felt like that nobody was talking about that stuff. Nobody was talking. So now it's all you hear about. People, but even it's gotten into the political world. We never talked about children's health in the political sphere at all, outside of maybe some conversations around poverty. But we are now talking about children's health on the national stage. It's political, right? And so it's are you on this side or on that side, which is unfortunate that it's, because our politics are divided. That's what it is. For having the conversation. Feels like a sign of the times. People are waking up to the fact that the things that you mentioned on the grocery shelves, they haven't been tested for safety. We don't know whether actually in some cases we do know they're harmful, but we have stuff on the shelf that is not regulated. And we're starting to pay attention to the fact that we are responsible for our own health, and we need to read labels. We need to pay attention. We can't just trust that there's a system in place that's protecting us. People are aware of that now, I think.
Yeah. It's sad, but true. So tell me a little bit, in 2009, what happened where you founded Documenting Hope, and, what was your mission and vision, and where did it start? And I'd love to even know more about where it is now, because I know it's really making a huge difference in this world.
Yeah, so I started Documenting Hope because I felt I had mentioned I'd written a book about the causes of the epidemic of chronic illness in kids, but I felt like nobody reads books. and I'd also been so profoundly moved by the fact that I had met and interviewed and talked to parents and practitioners who had helped these kids go from, severely disabled in some cases, like kids who had level 3 autism, who weren't speaking, who had seizures, to, completely help them overcome that. So they grew up to be normal kids who had, full life. Whereas if they hadn't sort of shifted how they were living, or if they had stayed in the conventional medical system, they wouldn't have had that outcome. So that moved me so profoundly that I was like, okay, here we have this situation where kids can either go this path, staying in the conventional model, and they're going to end up needing support or struggling or, whatever it is. And it can be mental health issues or physical health issues, or they can choose this path, which no one's talking about, and they can have a full life. And I felt like we have to let people know about this, because if parents knew that that was their choice and they had the support for that, either financially or educationally, or in terms of practitioners that knew how to do this work, they would always pick that one path that would lead to a fuller life for their child. So that's what made me start Documenting Hope, because I felt like we needed to gather evidence that this is happening. So we do research as a way to try and prove that these kinds of conditions are preventable and reversible, that they're driven by environmental and lifestyle factors, but then also to give parents the resources that they would need to be able to implement these kinds of changes in their life. So that's what we do. It's like the two arms. We have research and education are where we focus. We still have a lot of work to do on the research side, because the medical system is set up where everything must be evidence-based before it makes it into practice. So we're working very hard to try and pull together some evidence that shows that these kinds of methods work and that our environment is making our kids sick. But in the meantime, we're also working in parallel to teach the parents what they need to do, how to make the diet changes, how to detoxify their homes and their lives and their children's bodies, how to give bio-individual therapy, whether it's myofunctional therapy or whether it's some kind of brain-body integration therapy. There's so many amazing tools out there that just haven't made it into sort of the mainstream conventional set of offerings. So that's what Documenting Hope is really about, is trying to help push the needle with regard to how we approach autism, ADHD, autoimmune diseases, learning disabilities, all these things that are escalating in our kids because we don't have time, right? When the kids only have a short developmental window, we have to help them get all the resources they need to heal when they're in that short developmental window. They can have a typical full and amazing life.
Wow. And that's, as somebody who has gone through obviously my master's in speech and treat a lot of children that have autism and treat a lot of children with ADHD. And as a professional, what do we learn? We learn, of course, early intervention. So we know that side of things. We know the sooner the better. But we don't hear any of this in graduate school. So for us, being a huge professional that is supporting these children, I think every single pediatrician is going to, before they even get to the idea of a diagnosis, say, okay, let's start speech therapy. Let's see what, speech is going to do. And we don't know, what are we trying to do? We're just trying to get language out of them. We're trying to do sign language or see if they need some type of assisted technology device to help them communicate and decrease their frustration. And we're a lot of the times, as a speech therapist, the, quarterback of the outside referrals, sending where they should go and what they should do and trying to collaborate. But how are we supposed to do that if we don't even know that? And that's not even a part of our education. So it's just, a really tough situation.
Yeah, and we try to collaborate with and partner with a lot of the therapists that are on the front lines with our kids. So the occupational therapists and the physical therapies, speech language pathologists, these are the people that are working with families every single day that have the opportunity to have the conversations about like what's going on with diet. Maybe your child's speech issues are related to a motor issue and what helps support motor function in the body and brain. And, so that's a really important part of what we do, is also reach out to professionals who are in the trenches with the families. Even we have a health coach training program where we train health coaches on how to help support families through these kinds of changes, how to help learn not just about like diet and lifestyle and all these kinds of things, but how to sequence therapies. Because when you're a parent who has, let's say, a child with some kind of developmental delay, you have all these therapies out there that are presented to you, and you don't even know where to start or what works or how to optimize, sort of the sequence of them. So that's one of the things that we teach as well, is like, where do we start? How do we know which thing is going to be most impactful for a child?
Yeah. So is there different things that you start with every family and then watch for changes and signs and then, focus more on that? How does that kind of work out for a family that is saying, I want to try this. I don't want to do the conventional, or I want to do the speech OT, PT, maybe ABA, but I want to try this too. Is there like a best starting place for them?
I think it's bio-individual for every child, right? So you have to look at each child's history and what their most urgent needs are. But I will say that one thing that's often overlooked in terms of prioritizing therapies is that parents will go and put their kids into 40 hours of ABA or PT, or they'll be OT or whatever it is, without taking care of the foundations that make all of those therapies work better. So as an example, nutrition, which can be the hardest one to do because especially kids with autism are very picky eaters for a variety of reasons. That is absolutely foundational, because you cannot force the body into, do what it needs to do if the cells are not healthy. And the healthier you make the cells through being outside and supporting the mitochondria and eating foods that are nutrient dense and providing sort of a safe environment for that child. And when I say safe, I don't mean, are they in a crime-ridden community or not? Although that's obviously important and relevant. But what I'm talking about is, do they feel safe in their body? Is their nervous system regulated? Right. So many of these kids have such severe sensory issues that they're in a state of fight or flight all the time. Mm-hmm. And their cells and their system is just sensing danger constantly. So what can we do from a foundational perspective to make them feel safe in their body? So a lot of times, parents will start with nervous system regulation, and there's all kinds of things that you can do to help regulate a child's nervous system that are very simple. Okay. And the simplest is, I shouldn't say simple because this is hard for some parents for sure, but co-regulating with your child, which is really learning how to regulate your own nervous system, which is something I probably didn't learn until my 40s. I didn't know I had a nervous system until my 40s. But seriously, is a thing that we don't even have an awareness of, but our nervous system is feeding into our children's nervous system. So if we're in a state of fight or flight or stress or overwhelm, which a lot of special needs parents are just constantly by default, our children will pick up on that. And then they perpetuate that kind of fight or flight. So if we can teach ourselves through breathing, through sort of calming ourselves, a lot of times you can do that by just being outdoors in nature. I know it sounds so simplistic, but there's actual evidence behind it. If you're in a natural environment, your nervous system is more regulated. I mean, really basic, simple things, but that puts our body into a state of readiness for healing or for the therapeutic. So whatever the therapy is, whether it's something that you're doing with an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist, if your body is in a parasympathetic state, that state of rest and digest, rather than fight or flight, you can receive that therapy so much better. So that is one foundational piece we teach, in addition to the diet and lifestyle and detoxification and those kinds of things, is nervous system regulation. What can we do to help our kids feel safe in their bodies and calm?
Yeah, I love that. Especially as you said, you didn't even know you had that system, right? So I feel like a lot of our parents, they don't realize they're in that state of fight or flight. And by helping themselves, they're helping their children. And we hear that all the time in other ways as moms, right? Or even fathers, of you have to take care of yourself in order to be the best parent you can be. And this is just a really nice example of that. And what's a better thing to do with your child than regulate each other and just be in this nice state where that parasympathetic system is working all the magic, so that you guys can then continue to work on the other things together. I love that.
Yeah. And you almost have to think of it as almost like a pyramid of things that are happening in your child's body. And there's the foundational pieces that need to be in place before the top of the pyramid can be addressed. So the top of the pyramid would be things like cognition and speech and, emotional connections, and all these things that are more complex, higher order kind of functions. And in order for those to happen, you need to have all the foundational pieces in place, like cellular health, regulated nervous system, detoxification, so that the body isn't dealing with constant threats of chemicals or immune stressors. So that's why we it seems like, how could these foundational things really be that impactful? Because they're so simple, right? Like being outside or drinking clean water or cleaning air. You're trying to reduce the total load of stressors on a body
Mm-hmm.
so that it has capacity to do the higher order things like academic learning, speech, the complex motor tasks. Again, those are higher order. Let's take care of the foundations first.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. What is, since we talked a little bit about the diets, do you have, for any of the parents that are listening, do you have some recommendations of like go-to places to shop to kind of avoid, sometimes it's a learning process I find with parents of figuring out, what foods are good for them and their child, not even just their child, but them too. Do you have favorite like stores or online shopping or companies that you feel do a really good job at regulating the foods they sell?
Well, I think that one of the best things you can do if you live in an area where this is an option is if you have farmers markets.
Mm.
And not every place has a farmers market. I have to drive 35 minutes to get to one that's like a good farmers market, and not every place has that. But if you don't have a farmers market, a lot of times people will do CSAs or community supported agriculture, which is basically like you buy a share in a farm's produce. And so that is one of the best ways that you can lock into good quality food is you ask your farmer, are these vegetables sprayed with pesticides? Are they organic? And not everything needs to be like USDA organic, because sometimes that's beyond what a small farmer can actually do. They can't go and get certification because it's expensive and complicated. But you can just ask your local farmers at a farmer market and say, are these chemical free? Are they sprayed? How do you grow your whatever it is, whether it's vegetables or whether it's poultry or beef or what have you? And you want to go for meats that are pastured and that have not been, receiving antibiotics or hormones or anything like that. So as natural as possible, that's sort of the rule of thumb. If you can do farmers markets or CSAs, that's amazing. If you don't have access to that stuff, when you do go to whatever grocery stores are near you, you want to purchase organic whenever possible. There's some conventional foods that have more pesticides than others. So for instance, strawberries are very, very high in pesticides. Avocados and onions low in pesticides. So the Environmental Working Group does a wonderful annual kind of update to what they call their Dirty Dozen, which is the 12 most heavily sprayed produce items out there. And then they have the Clean 15, which are the least sprayed in terms of, so you want to reduce your toxic load. You want to get food as seasonal and local as possible. And as far as, regular grocery stores, you're shopping the perimeters and bypassing all of the, the processed and packaged stuff on the inside can be hugely important. And there are just dozens of ways to hack diet. Like right now, I would say you had asked before, when I started this work 20 years ago, there was hardly any organic, food in your most grocery stores. Nobody was like talking about processed foods versus whole foods. And now there's so many more choices where you can go to an Aldi, for instance, or you can go to a Kroger or, these big box stores, and you can find organic foods and you can find things that are whole foods and not as processed. So there are many more options now. And some people will say, well, it's too expensive. Eating organic is too expensive. And, that's absolutely true. Eating organic is expensive. That's why I suggested the CSAs. Sometimes those are cheaper when you support your local farmer. But also you have to think about the hidden costs, right? You're paying a little bit more for food, are going to prevent paying for healthcare costs later down the line.
Right.
I always tell people this too, when we think about the cost of food and how expensive it is. In 1910, the average American spent 40% of their household budget on food.
Wow.
Now we spend less than 10% of our household budget on food.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? Was food so much more expensive then? No, it's actually cheaper now. It's a priority, right? So we've put our money into other things. So that's a perspective, a little fact I like to put out there as a source of perspective is like, where's our priorities and, where are we putting our money? But that's not to minimize the other expenses in modern living. It's just a little bit of perspective and can we reallocate our resources and put more into food because it is that important.
Right. That's a really valuable perspective because that is our fuel, right? That is what we need to survive. A lot of the other things we don't necessarily need. And I think figuring out that, that's definitely a helpful one. And I love that shop the perimeter. I never even thought of that. And I'm envisioning my, Stop and Shop or one of those stores that have a lot of mixed types of foods. And that's a great one. I never realized that.
Yeah, if you actually practice it, because the perimeter are the produce, meat and dairy, and then like the whole foods are found in the perimeter. But if you actually go into the store and physically experience that, you start realizing how much all of the processed, packaged, toxin-laden food is in the middle, shelf-stable aisle. Mm-hmm. You don't want shelf-stable food. You want fresh food. Mm-hmm. So it is a good like physical, visceral experience to like challenge yourself and be like, I'm only going to shop the perimeter and see what you can.
I love that. Challenge accepted. Perfect. So one of the things you also describe a lot in your other podcasts or social media or your website is this total load. And now we're getting to the root cause and a whole child perspective. So for those listening that are new to that type of language, how would you define that total load and why it matters?
I think there is this tendency to look for smoking guns, like the thing that caused my child to develop autism. And a lot of times in the last few decades, we've focused primarily on genetics. And, we've put a lot of blame on genetics. If my child has rheumatoid arthritis or if my child has MS or whatever it is, they're going to look for the genes. Yeah. Learned in subsequent years that genes only are a fraction of the causative element, right? The bigger, larger proportion of what's causative is stuff in the environment and things that we're doing every single day. So what I've always said is that it isn't about one specific environmental factor. It's the cumulative and compounding effect of living in the modern world that is affecting our kids because they are experiencing that toxic total load in utero and actually this even goes back preconception, but preconception in utero and the first couple of years of life when they're developing. So if you have a child with developmental delays or speech delays or all different kinds of learning disabilities, that's because something was too much for their system to be able to handle during those critical developmental windows. So the total load of modern living includes the 80,000 chemicals that are on the market that have never been tested for safety that are in our shampoos and our soaps and our cosmetics and our furniture and our clothing. There's all these chemicals that we don't even know what they are. Mm-hmm. We have no awareness of it, right? We just buy the stuff at Target or we go to the store and we get the things that are just filled with toxins. Our body has to manage those toxins. Our liver has to process it. Our gut has to excrete it. And when we are children with limited capacity, little baby bodies that are learning how to speak and process complex visual stimulus and learn about complex human emotions, our bodies are going to prioritize survival, getting rid of any kind of immune threat, that whether that's infectious, whether that's toxic chemical, whether it's byproducts of the microbes in the gut that are excreting bacterial toxins, whatever it is, our body is going to have to manage that before it can get to development. So that's what I mean by total load, is that our children's bodies have too many stressors on them and not enough health support. So we spend a lot of time talking about nutrition. Nutrition is one way to help your body have the resources it needs to fight the infections or fight the toxins and detoxify it. So there's certain cofactors that you need to help move toxins out of your body. If you don't have the cofactors, the nutritional cofactors, your body's going to store those toxins in your body. And then your body's going to be in a state of inflammation. And inflammation is one of the underlying physiological problems we see in kids who have every kind of chronic health and developmental condition. So total load is just sort of a framework for saying it isn't one thing. It isn't the toxins in your toothpaste, or it isn't the pesticides on your food, or the vaccine that you got, or the antibiotics, or the proton pump inhibitors, or whatever your child might have been exposed to. It's all of it. It's all of it. And one stressor compounds and makes more stressors more difficult for your body to process and manage. And all of our kids really need to be focusing on is developing. Yeah. Think how much they go from like these tiny little peanuts when they come out to these, thinking human beings who are complex at 18 years old and like all that entire developmental trajectory. If they don't have all of their energy, all of their resources focused on development, if it's focused on survival, there's going to be an impact. There's going to be a developmental delay. There's going to be something that got sacrificed. That's what the total load concept means.
Wow. Yeah. it's just all, the whole body. I mean, if even, obviously I do a lot with myofunctional therapy, and we talk about how all these systems are connected and rely on each other. And that total load concept is, this is one human body. So obviously it is all connected. And what you mentioned, like that foundation, not only setting that foundation, but being able to get these bodies in a state where they can truly thrive. And I think that's what we sometimes lose sight of, is that we're not meant to just survive. We're meant to really, we have so much potential. We just have to allow ourselves to have that full potential.
Right. I mean, the human body is designed to heal. It wants to heal. We just have to get out of its way. It's kind of like when you scrape your knee, you don't really have to do anything to heal that scraped knee. It heals on its own.
Right.
But you kind of do have to clean it a little bit, take the dirt or whatever it was that was in there, that when you scraped it, you kind of have to clean it and protect it. You don't, it will never heal. So we do have to take those stressors out, the dirt, and the microbes and whatever on your skinned knee. Then the body will take it from there.
Yeah.
So if you remove the obstacles to healing, the body will heal. It's our default mode. Like, it knows what to do.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the modern child living in the United States of America, really the Western world, is just inundated with so many stressors, so many obstacles to healing on a day-to-day basis. A really basic example, Wi-Fi. EMF and Wi-Fi is one of those underrated things that people don't even know is a stressor on the body, but there's all kinds of medical and scientific literature showing that when you are near an EMF like a source, like a Wi-Fi router, your body is in a heightened immune state. It is reacting to it. So your body has to use resources to deal with that. So if you want your body to heal and sleep at night, for instance, turn your Wi-Fi router off. So your body isn't activated in an immune way, so that your body has the ability to heal. You have to start thinking about that way, like, what can I remove to allow my body to do what it knows how to do?
Yeah. If you were talking to the speech pathologists that are listening and they're working with children in that early intervention age range, so, 18 months to 3 years old, and they feel that they want to make this type of referral to help a family kind of get on this path, where would you tell them to start in terms of, referring that family?
So I think the first thing I would do is tell them about the resources on Documenting Hope's website. We have, like, for every condition out there, because a lot of times parents come in thinking about their condition. My child has this issue. It's a speech language delay or apraxia or whatever it is that they come in with. So we have all those resources on our websites, articles and webinars, and we have a practitioner directory. And sometimes that's the first best thing like a speech language pathologist can do, is send them to an integrative or functional medicine oriented practitioner. It could be a naturopath. It could be somebody who practiced traditional Chinese medicine. It could be an integrative MD, but we have all of those practitioners in our directory, and you can search by geography, because starting with an integrative practitioner or a holistic practitioner sometimes gives the parents what they need to believe that something's out of balance physiologically. A lot of times they'll do lab tests, for instance, and I'm not saying every child needs lab tests, but what happens is, if you go to one of these integrative or functional practitioners or naturopath, they run some labs. They'll do a stool test or a blood test or a urine test, and that will show the parent on paper what's out of balance. Whoa, this kid's microbiome is really lacking diversity. Or whoa, this child's like lead levels and cadmium levels are off the chart. Or whoa, this child is nutrient deficient and is lacking magnesium and zinc and copper and iron. Whatever it may be, bio-individually, that sometimes wakes the parent up to, oh, there's root causes here. This isn't just bad luck or bad genes. This is root causes that I can address. I can address nutrient deficiencies. I can address when there's like microbial imbalances. Like, that's something that is actionable. So if you're an SLP listening to this, just know that there's an entire practitioner directory on documentinghope.com where you can send your patients there, your clients there, to tell them to get additional root causes help. And then the other thing that I'll say that I've really loved that has emerged over the last few years is our health coach training program has actually enrolled a lot of OTs, SLPs, PTs, and people who are sort of like in these early intervention programs. We've developed like this little pod of these professionals, and we meet once a month as a community. We have community calls for our health coach training program. So if you're a graduate, and we talk to each other and we share best practices, and it's really wonderful to feel so aligned with other professionals that are out there who see it the same way you do, who see the root causes and are looking for ways to help support their parents. Because the SLP can't change the child's diet. And you come into our program, you learn how to talk to parents about it, which is, a critical role for people who are on the front lines with our kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you don't want it to feel overwhelming to the parents. You want it to feel like this is, let's start with small changes. Sometimes those smaller changes show the changes of their child, and now they get more motivated or more, focused on like, wow, this really is out. Because a lot of the times it's the first time a parent is hearing this, and it could seem a little like, why is nobody else saying that? Or why didn't, of course, most parents really love and trust their pediatrician. So why isn't the pediatrician saying that? So I think planting those seeds in a way that is not overwhelming and in a way that feels comfortable to the family is really important as well.
So we have an online membership community for parents. It's called Healing Together, where we invite parents in, and we meet twice a month live via Zoom calls, and we have ebooks and videos and all these kinds of things that guide them step by step.
Wow.
But we're about to publish a new ebook that we call our Autism Starter Guide, which any person, any professional can just give to a parent, and it just sort of gently introduces them to the world of whole child root causes, kind of to autism in particular. And it's not just autism that it's applicable for, but again, people come in through their diagnosis. And that's sort of a way that, like an SLP could hand off this ebook, for instance, and say, this is just, it's got some bullet points and action steps you can take. And it's just gentle, it isn't telling them what they need to do. It's more shifting the mindset about what's going on with your child.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing all of that, because I think, like I said to the parent, but even the professional of like, how can I go about doing this? And especially I think that it's going to be our newer graduates also, as they continue, as this generation does change into feeling like there is this more holistic way of living. And as somebody who is 12 years into my profession, I feel like I remember coming out of graduate school and it being overwhelming, and you're like trying to figure out like, how can I best approach this? Am I confident in myself, and to have the backing of everything that you're saying that Documenting Hope provides, I know can be so powerful to the new SLP as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what we're meant to be, a resource to the professionals out there.
So I would love to hear about what are some of the major, or you would say major challenges you face currently or faced in the past of making this kind of work mainstream. So I am, again, in this myofunctional world, there's a big divide between the dentist that does, expansion early and mixed dentition, and the orthodontist who will not expand a child until they're, at least 7, 8, or 9 years old. So there's, I feel like, always that divide. And I'm sure among practitioners and families and policymakers, there's some of those challenges that you faced as well. What does that look like?
I think one of the biggest barriers to this becoming more mainstream is the payer system. So almost everything that I know of that is helpful to children, looking at like root causes or what's physiologically out of balance for them, and the therapeutics that are going to help correct those things, that's just not covered by insurance. So we have a problem where our insurance system pretty much covers medications, and then they cover therapies like ABA. And things that I learned about, we know about pharmaceutical companies and the lobbying that's gone on, and we understand why the payers, that insurance companies, cover pharmaceuticals, but not a lot of other things, or procedures like surgeries. But with regard to ABA, as autism as an epidemic was exploding, the ABA centers started growing, and then they started consolidating. So it came with the first major purchase of CARD, which is an ABA center starting out of Florida. And it was purchased by Blackstone, which is a private equity firm. So what we saw happen was private equity got involved in purchasing up all of the ABA centers. And then they took the private equity took their lobbyists and went to every single state legislature in all 50 states to get ABA covered by insurance. So what just happened there? What happened was the Blackstone and private equity created a whole market for themselves to be paid for by insurance companies. And because of because of our orientation toward covering people with disabilities, and autism is considered a disability, it was very politically popular to provide services for our children with autism. The problem is ABA is very limited in what it's doing. It isn't a root cause approach. It's symptom suppressive. It's trying to manage behaviors. And there are some ABA practitioners that know this and take a different and better approach, and some that don't have any awareness of it. And in some cases, especially for non-speakers, ABA can be really traumatic for some kids. So we have a system that is paying for that, but not paying for nutrition. It's paying for forcing a child to sit still in a seat or forcing a child to hold a pen when they are not regulated enough to do either of those activities, instead of paying for a therapy or approach that helps them regulate first. There's a major disconnect about why the children with autism have these symptoms and what it takes to help them overcome it. It's still this like top-down symptom suppressive kind of approach, rather than looking at children bio-individually, seeing where the imbalances are and approaching it from there. So that is one of the biggest challenges. Organization, we are also finding that funding for research is very hard to come by. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We run totally on donations from individuals, and we find that it is very hard to compete with, say, NIH funding. We put in a grant for NIH funding. Recently, there was one $50 million pot of funds that went to what's called the Autism Data Science Initiative. And when we looked to see who the recipients were, they were all university-based. So you cannot do independent research. It's very difficult because you need to be sort of in the system. And what's the problem with the university-based research? It's owned by pharmaceutical companies and hospital systems, and like it's all kind of entangled there. So I think those are two of the major issues: is the research is difficult to fund, and then the payer system. But I do believe very much that in the concept of moms moving markets, and moms start, and dads too, but moms really are the major decision makers here. When moms opt out of ABA, when moms start focusing on the root causes stuff to the best of their ability at home, those businesses are going to go away. There's not going to be a financial incentive anymore. So that is something that will take time, but I believe very much in moms moving markets and having them pick the options that are supporting their children as whole children, rather than just suppressing their symptoms.
I couldn't agree more. Do you find that there's any preschools that are like any of the special ed preschools? So have you seen any changes in any preschools that go about this in a more total load? I'm just thinking like there's so many special ed preschools, and like if there was a way to incorporate some of this into the preschool level, how, powerful that could be.
I mean, I haven't seen enough, but what I have seen, which is encouraging, is the growth of nature-based schools. Recently, there have been a number of really wonderful nature-based schools that have started and are off and running. They also struggle with funding. And then also, it's very hard for those nature-based schools to take children in who have special needs, especially autism, because a lot of the nature-based schools are kind of like free range, go outside, and children with autism oftentimes have elopement issues, and they will run away. So to marry the nature-based schools with the needs of kids who have autism, that is a challenge that needs to be met soon, because those kids are the ones that are going to benefit the most from a nature-based school. So I feel optimistic that we are seeing more of these types of preschools. And, a lot of the homeschool cooperatives are lovely that way, because that's what parents are opting out of the conventional school system. And, little pods of 6 kids who are, homeschool co-ops. And that's very encouraging, because it feels like that allows the kids to be in a natural environment and doing the things that kids are supposed to do, instead of this like 19th century factory model of education. one size fits all, right? That's happening in our medicine and it's happening in our education. Exactly.
Yeah.
But we just need to push more for those,
Right.
I think, nature-based schools.
Yeah. And I think just like you said, that mom driven, I think the moms really do hold the power here and they're demanding these changes, and then there will be no choice but for the systems to change. So I am really hopeful there. Would you say that is, or is there something else that you feel would be something that you would consider the biggest win or breakthrough that you've seen recently that continues to guide your hope into these changes?
I feel like that's definitely something I'm optimistic about on the educational side. But I also feel like moms and dads taking control of just the day to day, just realizing the importance of how foundational what you do every single day is. That's what gives me the most optimism, because that is doable. Any parent can make changes to diet and what's in the home environment, can get rid of the toxins. That in a lot of cases, it's like cheaper to not have the toxins in your house. Like if you walk through the average American's house and you see like the different name brand laundry detergents and shampoos and cleanings and like all of the plastic toys and the junk and paraphernalia that are culturally normal, if you remove all that stuff, you actually are going to save money. You can clean with baking soda and vinegar. And you really can. I do this. You can use Castile soap, which is very inexpensive for so much of your cleaning needs. So I do think that is where we can make the most impact. If we just each individually decide that we're going to live a low tox life and that we're going to focus on the foundations of nutrition, sleep, regulation, that's where we're going to have the most impact.
Yeah. And thanks to places like your organization and Documenting Hope, you're empowering the families to be able to make those changes. So thank you so much. This has been amazing to listen to. And even myself, as somebody who tries to kind of be on that route, I know I could do more and do better. And I feel like having Documenting Hope and your resources and books and all of that is so helpful to the parents and to the professionals that do want to know more. Would you mind just saying what your website is and any information that anyone listening can learn more about you and Documenting Hope and all these amazing resources that you have available?
Yeah, so documentinghope.com is where you can find most of our resources. One of the things that I love, we just recently relaunched our website, is that we have a search bar right on the main page. So I don't care what you're looking for. You want information about a therapy or a diet or a condition, you just type that in and we have a search engine that's really powerful that helps you find what you need. So documentinghope.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and X, YouTube, and Facebook, because we always we have newsletters that come out every month. So people would want to get on our newsletter list. And then we have monthly webinars that are free. And we also have our community Healing Together, which you can find on the Documenting Hope website. And that's where parents get like a little bit more concierge kind of hand-holding to learn how to do this work for their children. So that's the most important part to me, is community. Like it's very isolating to do this kind of stuff on your own, but the more you come together as a community and find other parents who are doing it, other practitioners who are doing, it becomes normal. And then at some point we've got what they call like the 100th monkey, which is the tipping point, right? Where you have everybody's doing this and this becomes our new cultural normal. So that's what I'm aiming for. I feel like we can get there, but we need to do it together.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being a huge part of that. And yeah, we all just got to work together and get this all moving forward. And you've done so much to move this. So truly, thank you so much for everything. And thank you for being a guest on this podcast. I know this will really help a lot of people just listening to this.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Talk the Talk.
We hope it was enjoyable and educational and further supports you both personally and professionally.
For more information, please check out our Wyo Myo and Myo Minute podcast, as well as our other episodes of Talk the Talk. And don't forget to check out our tongue training appliance, Spot Pal, to help with tongue thrusting, thumb sucking, snoring, TMJ, mouth breathing, and so much more. Visit thespotpal.com.